Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Salon. We are very excited to have Dr. Morgan Barense with us actually, I know Morgan from the memory community, and I think the last time that we met in person was SFN of 2018 or 2019. Such a long time ago. I remember that my laptop had broken down at some point, and we were talking about that. Morgan is a very accomplished and very well-known figure in human memory, and many of her students and former trainees are also well-known. So it's been like a very wonderful and prolific career that Morgan has had. We usually don't give formal introductions, but I just want to say that I personally really liked Hippocamera, which I think Morgan made when my friend Chris Honey, who has been on the Salon before, was in Toronto, and they were working together on this. And just the idea is so brilliant to use the concept of how memory replay works and use it to bring forward memories and images so that elderly or people who suffer from memory disorders can benefit from it. And I absolutely loved it because it's not just using our research for research proper, which Morgan excels at, but also to use it for applications that genuinely improve people's lives. So I really appreciate her very wide range of contributions to the field. And Morgan is also at Toronto. For those of you who don't know, Morris Moscovich is there, who's one of the I would say founders of the field of episodic memory at this point.
You could say that, yeah.
In so many ways. And I have personally had the pleasure of working with trainees of Morgan and Morris. And also I've had the pleasure of using fMRI data sets that Morris's lab had produced and published papers with them by reanalyzing them and modeling them. So there is, for those of you who are outside the field of memory, there is a beautiful little ecosystem of very friendly and collaborative people who share data and promote each other and, share expertise and knowledge. And I had missed running into people like Morgan during the pandemic. So it's such a pleasure to have you here. With that informal introduction, I just want to remind everyone that the Learning Salon is a forum for interdisciplinary discussions that are contentions and bridges between biological and artificial learning. If you have a question and you're from a different field, absolutely feel free to ask it in the chat. Drop questions that are for clarifications. And if you have a question to the speaker, even if it's clarification, but you can ask after the talk, put it in the ask a question area below and vote on each other's question. If you don't want to appear on screen, say ask for me. Otherwise, we might ask you to join the discussion on screen if you can join us later. The other thing is we encourage understanding. We don't shy away from disagreement, but we stay respectful. So it's totally okay if you disagree, as long as it's justified, you have good reasons, and you don't interrupt others, and we are respectful. Disagreements are totally okay. Another thing, if you're a junior researcher or student, feel perfectly free to ask questions. There is no dumb questions here. And because the format is a shorter talk and a long discussion, it's a good place to also exercise question asking skills. If you're on the shy side, no worries. You can use a pseudonym. You can drop your questions. You don't need to appear on screen. So there are ways to engage for everybody involved. Okay, with that introduction, and I did not even talk about the apocalyptic image that Twitter is giving about the current versions of AI. We can leave that to the discussion section. I'd like to invite Morgan to share her screen and tell us about Hippocamera and human memory, as John is exiting the car.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's really, I've been following the Learning Salon, seeing all the announcements, and it's a real thrill to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback. So as Ida was saying, our starting point for this project was really this, it was a wacky idea. It was, can we take what we know about how the brain supports memory, specifically how the hippocampus supports memory, and build something that mimics it? And we were inspired or really motivated by the fact that, there's been these enormous strides in basic science in understanding how the brain supports memory, but not a lot of that work has been translated back to the real world to provide practical solutions for people who are experiencing memory problems. So that's what we set out to build. And I'm going to just really quickly try to give you an overview of this Hippocamera project in the 10 to 15 minutes or so. So countless studies have established the fact that memory for the episodic details of life events is very vulnerable to aging. So for example, this grandmother here will likely have no trouble remembering all sorts of semantic or gist level details that are shared across many different events, like her grandson's name or the fact that he loves playing with digger trucks. But she might have a hard time remembering the episodic details that are specific to a given event. Like how on this particular park trip that I'm showing the picture here for, her grandson saw his first ice cream truck and enjoyed a really delicious ice cream cone after the trip. These are those unique elements of an event that enable one to go back in their memories and richly re-experience past events. And the loss of these memories can have a huge impact on well-being, damaging confidence and leaving one feeling disconnected from the events of their lives and from their identity as a person. So one promising approach to mitigate this kind of memory loss is through life logging with digital memory augmentation. So here, portable devices capture photos and videos of everyday life events that users can later review to prompt their memory. But the problem is there aren't many life logging solutions out there that are focused on improving memory. And those that are have very complicated interfaces, like some shown here on this screen, and were not designed with older adults or those with memory impairments in mind. So that's what we set out to create. And for the better part of the last 8 years, a team of people in my lab have been working to develop and validate a smartphone-based application that's inspired by how the brain supports memory. The result is what we lovingly call Hippocamera. It's a digital memory aid that mimics the hippocampus so it can scaffold the consolidation of recent memories. So what is Hippocamera? Well, on the surface, by design, the app is extremely simple, with just 2 functions that allow users to record and replay life events. So first, it guides users to pay attention to the events of their lives and record extremely rich memory cues. And then later, the app triggers memory by replaying these event cues in curated study sessions that are designed to promote memory. So how does it work? So let's say that there's some event happening that a Hippocamera user wishes to remember. They're going to press this large Create Memory button, and then they're prompted to record an 8-second verbal description of the event. Then they're going to capture a 24-second video snippet of the event. They're not capturing the whole event. It's just really the tip of the iceberg of that event. And then they're going to rate the event's significance. And in the background, Hippocamera combines these elements to make a compact and distinctive cue that has those 24 seconds of speeded video with the 8-second audio tag overlaid. So this guided recording process means that memory encoding is intentional. That is, it forces users to stop and pay attention to the events of their lives. And because these cues are selectively captured, users go through their lives paying more attention to what's happening to them. So they go looking for events to record, and they're focused on whether any given event that's happening is going to be worth remembering. We later replay these memory cues using principles known to optimize memory. So for starters, we know from the days of Ebbinghaus that it is best to study in short sessions distributed across time, compared to a single long session of cramming. And so users get these occasional reminders to replay throughout the day in short sessions that interconnect up to 5 different events. So this is what a replay session looks like. Each event is preceded by a timestamp that embeds the event in its temporal context, which we know is a powerful memory cue. And then the user watches cues from 5 events. So I'm just going to quickly go through some. So I'll stop it right there. I hope you could hear the audio tags overlaid.
We
But
couldn't hear
you
them,
could? Okay,
unfortunately.
great.
We could
You
not.
could not hear them. Okay, I'm sorry. So what there were first of all these speeded videos, and so the inspiration for speeding those videos came from the endogenous phenomenon of hippocampal replay. This phenomenon by which the hippocampus replays memory in high speed. It's almost like on fast forward to the rest of the brain in a process that's thought to underpin memory consolidation. In addition to, this inspiration from hippocampal replay, on a practical level, it just makes these review sessions more efficient because you can get through content faster. Unfortunately, it sounds like you couldn't hear them, but overlaid on the speeded videos was that 8-second audio tag in which the user is describing the event. And I think this is a really important point. They're taking the time to say what's happening, why this is important to them, and linking it to other events in their lives and other events that might not be discernible from the video alone. Okay, so with Hippocamera built, which took a long time, the next step was to validate it. So in this study that I'm going to talk about first, we ran 2 interventions, one in which participants recorded events for 2 weeks and one in which they recorded the events for 10 weeks. We brought them in for a cued recall interview in which we tested their memories for these captured events 1 week after they had stopped using Hippocamera. And then 1 week after that, they came back for an fMRI session. And then finally, 3 months after they had turned their phone in and were no longer using Hippocamera, participants came back into the lab for another autobiographical interview. Importantly, there are 2 conditions in our design: replayed and hidden baseline. So in this critical replay condition, each memory cue was replayed on average 9 times. But in order to assess the benefit of replay with Hippocamera, we need to compare memory for these replayed events to something else. So for this, we have this baseline control condition in which the cues are hidden. So that is, our participants captured the memory cues, but they never saw them again until they were tested at cued recall. We administered a modified autobiographical interview to test their memories. So participants were shown that cue without the timestamp, and then they could tell us everything that they could remember about the event. So we might get a response like this. We then took these narratives and painstakingly quantified the specific details that were provided. So first, we don't count any details that are discernible from the cue or the audio tag alone. But our key split was between what we call semantic and episodic details. So semantic details reflect facts that are shared across many events, and they're not tied to this specific event. So this could be facts about where this cottage is located and the sorts of toys that this woman's grandson likes. The episodic details, in contrast, are specific to this particular moment in time. So an example here might be the fact that you couldn't hear this in the audio tag, but the grandmother had just spotted this big black water snake. So she said, "We're going down, we're going to look for friendly critters." And so these are those details that distinguish this event from other times that she might have been swimming with her grandkids at the cottage and bring her back to this moment. Memory for these episodic details are thought to be dependent on the hippocampus, and they are the target of the Hippocamera intervention. So what did we find? So what I'm showing you here are the number of details participants recalled for their hidden baseline control memories and for their replayed memories. And we're splitting these up according to whether those details are semantic or episodic in nature, and whether they came from the 2-week intervention or the 10-week intervention. So for semantic details, we found no influence whatsoever of replay. This was the case when testing was done either immediately after the intervention or following a 3-month delay, and it was the case for both the 2-week and the 10-week intervention. However, fortunately, this story is quite different for episodic details. So at immediate test, we found that every single participant in both interventions showed a benefit from replay. And this effect held again for every participant when tested after a 3-month delay. And I want to emphasize that this preservation was observed 3 months after discontinuing phone use, indicating that memory for these episodic details was no longer dependent on the phone. And if we consider these results in terms of the percent benefit for replayed relative to hidden events, we find that the gains were really quite substantial, ranging from a 56 to an 84% boost in memory for episodic details.
Morgan, can I ask a question just
Of
because I
course.
missed? So am I under? So the pink, the hidden is the control, basically, right?
The hidden is the control. That's right.
So why did the hidden also go up at 10 weeks? Is that a consolidation effect, or why does the
So
pink
the
go
10-week
up?
intervention, so you mean, I'm not sure if I can use my mouse here. Let's see. So do you mean this comparison of this 10-week relative to this 2-week?
I'm just trying to understand what the hidden is compared to the replayed.
Yes.
Is that a
Okay.
control?
So the 2-week, so the hidden is events that were captured, but they never were replayed. They were never kind of part of, they never saw, the participants never saw them, these events again, until they were tested. We had 2 completely separate interventions, one that lasted for 2 weeks, and that's shown here, and then a totally separate group of participants that used it for 10 weeks. I didn't go into the difference between these conditions, but one reason why the 10-week bar is so much higher is because we asked them to record only 1 event per day in the 10-week intervention, whereas in the 2-week, we asked them to capture 5 events per day. So, this is a bit of a history here, but when we started out with Hippocamera, we thought, this will be great. We'll, once every hour, we'll have people take a cue, or we'll capture some sort of cue, and we'll have this log of their entire day. And at the end, they can go through and review it. I kind of hadn't, when we made that design, we kind of hadn't thought about how life works, because there aren't, every hour of every day, I don't have an event that I want to remember. Generally, on any given day, there's probably 1 good event. And that's what we want to put our focus on. That's what we want to be the anchor. And so that we have these like high quality, distinctive events that are going to have episodic details in the first place. So that's why the 10-week bar in general is so much higher, because those are just better events.
I see. So just so I understand, it's not just 2 versus 10 weeks. It's just that there was a higher quality single event in the 10-week group per day, whereas there had been 5 per day in the 2-week group. So I see. So had this been done in retrospect in the same way, then they would have looked a little bit like they would have all looked like the 10-day. It's just
they would have all looked like the 10-week, except we wouldn't have had that many
differential
memories.
Effect. Yes, I see. Okay.
So it's the same number of memories that are tested in both. It's just that in the 10-week, we slowed the pace down, had this focus on 1 high quality event per day, which was, I couldn't believe it took, 4 decades of life to realize that that's kind of how life, that's how episodic memory works. We don't want to remember everything. It's much better. And there's evidence that shows this in cases with Alzheimer's disease. If you have just 1 distinctive event per day, like even just going to the doctor's office, people remember the other events that come along with that a lot better. So it's good to have, it's from a mnemonic perspective, it's better to have 1 really good thing than a lot of kind of mediocre things.
I see. Okay. I'm glad I asked.
Yes. Sorry. I should have taken the time to expand on the different interventions. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So we also wanted to look in the brain to understand whether replay changed the brain activity that was associated with these events. So we used representational similarity analysis to get a characterization of the distinctiveness with which each event was coded. So participants were scanned during an episodic verification task that probed memory for each event. So we gave them a single word. So one example might be the word snake, and they had to say yes or no, does this pertain to the event? During this period of time, we measured how distinct the patterns of activity were for hidden memories relative to replayed memories. So looking at the hippocampus specifically, we found that replayed events were associated with more distinctive neural codes than events that had been hidden. And this really mattered in terms of memory. So that is, greater distinctiveness in terms of the patterns of hippocampal activity was associated with greater recall of episodic details. So this suggests that Hippocamera is promoting rich episodic memories by making the coding of those memories more distinct in the hippocampus. Finally, we performed a text-based natural language analysis that identifies and quantifies emotional states. So here we found that replayed events were recalled using more positive language. And I think this is a really important finding that speaks to this vicious cycle between depression and memory loss. And it suggests that Hippocamera may contribute to emotional well-being overall. And we see some of this positivity in what our participants told us after the intervention. And I'm just going to share 4 quotes that capture a lot of the common themes. So in the words of Alf, he said, "It was very motivational. I started to have more confidence in myself and started to be more aware of things around me." And this fits with the theme that using Hippocamera made people pay more attention to the ordinary events of life as they decided if the current moment was worth recording. And here Donna indicated that this increased focus on the little things in life made her whole day feel more positive. And often participants like Marilyn told us that the app just got her out of the house so that she'd have more flavor in her reminders. And finally, someone named Gus gave us this really, really inspiring feedback that I think highlighted the fact that this generation of older adults is eager to embrace technology to preserve their cognition. So this feedback from participants made us realize that Hippocamera is more than just a memory intervention. It's also something that can affect lifestyle overall. So we're asking our users to go through their days with the intention of capturing one special event that they want to remember. And this can serve as encouragement to engage in unique activities or to simply find something special about an otherwise routine event that you might not have noticed if you weren't looking for it. So my postdoc at the time, Melissa Mead, designed a study to get at this idea specifically. So we designed this study during the pandemic lockdowns when we were all experiencing that disorienting feeling that time had lost all meaning. We were stuck at our homes. Our lives lacked those distinctive events that we need to mark the passage of time. And we were left feeling unmoored and unable to place events in any sort of a temporal context. So this was undoubtedly a really awful time, but it was even worse for older adults, and especially those experiencing the early stages of decline. This low social and cognitive enrichment environment of lockdowns was a major risk factor for subsequent neurodegeneration. And numerous studies, unfortunately, corroborated that, reporting really rapid declines in cognitive status among vulnerable seniors following the onset of these lockdowns. So for this study, we ran an 8-week intervention. As with the first study, we had 2 conditions that were administered on alternating weeks. So on routine weeks, we asked participants to record a typical event that was reflective of their daily lockdown life. But then on unique weeks, we asked them to record something that was distinct from that usual routine. And we gave them suggestions for COVID-safe activities, but we emphasized this doesn't have to be something, totally off the wall in terms of its uniqueness. It can be something really small, like taking a walk in a new area or connecting with an old friend, just something different, even in a small way from the status quo. And then we asked them to reflect on how it was different and to commit to remembering it via their Hippocamera memory cue. And then at the end of each day, participants completed a series of questions that assessed the positive and negative emotions that were experienced that day, as well as the perceived passage of time and the uniqueness of the day. And then at the end of each 4-week period, we again administered that autobiographical interview, this time, of course, over Zoom, assessing memory for events of the past month, as well as the uniqueness of the event. So these assessments of uniqueness were combined to make a composite uniqueness score for each day's event, which we then related to how well it was subsequently remembered. And perhaps not surprisingly, we found that unique events were better remembered. And this was the case for both episodic, and this time we find an effect for these semantic details. But our primary question was whether breaking out of this pandemic routine, just even in this small way, taking 1 minute to record this cue, could affect well-being on a daily basis. So we looked at the relationship between the composite uniqueness score and those daily measures. And here we found that days that were deemed to be more unique were associated with greater positive affect. In addition, days that were associated with less boredom, days that were unique were associated with less boredom and were perceived to pass by faster. So we still have a lot more to do to unpack these findings, but I think that they suggest that just taking that time to focus on something that is out of your routine just once per day can meaningfully enhance quality of life in older adults. So these findings show that unique events are not only remembered better, but they're also associated with these broader emotional benefits. And I think that this was a direction I never thought that we were going to go in when we embarked on this project. But I think it touches on this intimate connection between memory for the events of our lives and for our well-being overall. And it also provides a really simple intervention to improve quality of life in older adults, a population who experiences much higher levels of isolation, even in normal times without these pandemic distancing measures in place. And please let me know if your Hippocamera is something that you're interested in for your own research, either to procure rich veridical cues of everyday events, or because you think there might be a specific population who could benefit. We've committed to making Hippocamera available to the research community. So just in closing, I want to say that Hippocamera has been a huge collective effort from an incredible team of scientists. So in addition to Chris Martin and Brian Hong, who really led that first study, and Melissa Mead, who led the pandemic study, this has been a long-term collaboration with Chris Honey. It really started out with this, as I said, this really crazy idea: can we build an external hippocampus? Over lunch one day back actually in 2014 when he was at the University of Toronto. Miranda Chang, Rachel Newsom, and Katerina Saville were instrumental in collecting, scoring, and transcribing the literally thousands of pages of autobiographical interview transcripts. And Andrew Sia programmed the beta version of the app when he was a computer science undergraduate work study student. And of course, an incredible team of undergraduate RAs who made dealing with these mountains of data possible. And thanks very much for listening. I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. This was so awesome and so clear and so to the point. I don't know, is John frozen or no, he's here. But John, you're muted. Let me see if I can't unmute you for some reason.
I'll just get my headphones so we don't get that echo.
John, do you want to? If you change your audio midway, that's potentially the reason. Hi. So just, you will need to go out and come back. Unmute. I know. Can you hear me? Because I was telling you that this happens when you change your source of audio. So if you could go out and come back in, then we can solve this. Okay, so let's, for a few seconds, sort of. And everyone, I want to invite everyone to put their questions in the Ask a Question area as well. While we are asking the questions, we're just going to wait a moment for John to get back. Let me just do this. And so I can invite him back and make sure that. Okay, I'm going to invite him again.
Hello?
Perfect.
Oh, okay. All right. Should I go, Ida? I couldn't remember what you said.
Sure, please go ahead first.
So, Morgan, I have to admit, I wasn't super familiar with this. And it's kind of amazing. I have so many questions. It's kind of nice, like going to a movie and when you haven't seen any of the reviews, right?
Yep.
Can I?
By the way, Morgan, maybe you want to unshare the screen so we can go into discussion mode.
Absolutely. Sorry. And
Could
now
you
I will.
remind me? Is this an iPhone app? Is this a phone app?
It's a phone app. It's a smartphone app. Yep. So for either iPhone or for, and how do do I just close video to stop sharing?
Just like you did before, yeah, but not on your own face, but only on the screen. So
on the screen. Okay, there we go. Great.
I see. So what I'm trying to understand, we've done some work ourselves and other people have, I'm sure you're aware that motivational effects can have incredible effects on quite low-level behavioral features, right? In other words, we've done work, quality of learning, reaction times, just kind of incredible knowledge and motivational effects on parameters you didn't know that motivation would have an effect on, basically, right? And it's like Parkinson's patients yelling fire and they suddenly can run,
Right.
So do you think that, do you think this is a memory prosthetic, or do you think it's a memory enhancer? In other words, do you think it's actually improving memory capacity per se, or do you think it's having a gain effect on people's memory ability by motivating the quality of the? Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I see exactly what you mean. So I think it's both. I will say that for the results that I showed here, I was comparing those to hidden memories. So those were memories that people took and they didn't know, and sometimes they didn't know if they were going to be replayed or not. The assignment could be random. And so those hidden memories benefited from all of those kinds of enhanced attention and motivation at encoding. And that's always been something that's really annoyed me about presenting these results, because I think we're really underestimating the benefit from Hippocamera, which is exactly what you just described. Maybe motivation isn't quite right, but it's a large behavioral intervention. It is, if you are committed to getting your one event per day, you wake up and you start thinking about it. You say, what's going to be my event today? Or as something is happening, you're like, when is going to be the right time to capture my event? Is this the best time? Is this, or is something going to happen later that's going to be better? So I think there's this just kind of snaps people out of autopilot in a way. And that applies to both the hidden and the replayed condition, but in a way that is not only for the specific events that we're targeting, but there should be halo effects to other events that we haven't measured. And so we're looking to do those sorts of designs where, we look to see, is there this transfer to other events that weren't the ones that were specifically targeted?
It's interesting. You should talk about those halo effects. I mean, we did a study on sort of motivational effects in sequence learning where some of the targets were known and you could sort of anticipate and be excited you knew them, but there was actually a halo effect on random targets in the sequence. In other words, your motivation spread to targets that you didn't know, and there are potential. So just so I understand, does that mean then that if you'd had a third control group where you'd said, look, this is the event we want you to remember today, you just said, this is the one, then that would, it sounds to me, you think that would be inferior to either hidden or replay.
100%. Yeah. If there were some way, this is something that we thought about. Ultimately, we want to advance this to people that have really severe memory impairments. And that might come with it as sort of a prospective memory impairment, like remembering to take a Hippocamera cue. And so we thought, could we use biosensors or computer vision or some sort of Google Glass to have Hippocamera probe and say, okay, take an event now. And I think, that's probably better than nothing, but it's not as good as the individual saying, this is the one, this is my, souvenir for the day.
I see.
I think it's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. And, you know, if we want to decompose, you know, how is Hippocamera, how are we getting these huge benefits? It's an important one to ask. Right now, this is just a kitchen sink, you know, I think that's the right way to do it. I guess it depends on what your goal is, you know.
I agree with you. Look, I agree with you entirely. I mean, that's what we've done in our interventions in Totally Different World, is kitchen sink it and to get effect sizes.
Exactly.
You want effect sizes and then worry about where they come from. So I love that you say that. So just one other thing. In other words, so there would be the control group that's hard to do. Then there's the hidden one. Then there's the replay one. So there was that paper, right, in Science back in 2013, maybe earlier, by Karpicki et al., right, where they showed that the best way to really imprint a memory is to keep retrieving the good memory, right? Practice retrieval. So am I right to sort of put this in the same kind of camp that you're, through replay, you're practicing retrieval of a good memory, and that's what's giving you the amplification effect? Is that right?
I think it's part of it. So, and that's something that we actually want to build into the app, to have people, and it's something that older adults have said, they want to say, they want to know, is my memory improving? So they want to be tested, you know, they want to be asked these questions. So building those kinds of testing effects into the app is something that we want to do. But, you know, right now, I think that's part of it. So showing, and you didn't get the full benefit of the cue because you couldn't hear the audio tag, but they are really evocative. Because it's your own voice, you know, describing, overlaid on this speeded video, which is also really evocative. And so I think that's just it's a rich reactivator of the memory. And then it's also, so it's embedded in, so there's the chain of events of these 5, there's this timestamp. So it comes up, you know, it says September 30th, 2022, Friday at 6 p.m. And you're thinking, hey, what was I doing then? So you're already starting to kind of anticipate it, make a prediction about what's going to come. And then you get it. You could be right or not. And then you're guessing, you know, what's going to be the next one that comes. And it's, you know, could be something from August, you know, and then you start to think about how these different memories relate to each other. And I think they're really interesting things that we can do there in terms of the composition of those replay sessions. So, you know, you have a set of memories, and this is some work that we're doing with Chris Honey and Tyler Tomita in his lab. What are the optimal links between memories? Like, what are the features by which we associate real life events together?
So a little bit like meta memories in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing in a way, right? So, and just so I understand, when you did this in these subjects, these were people who were impaired, or were these healthy subjects?
They were healthy, except for, so all were community dwelling without any formal diagnosis. 4 people in that 10-week intervention actually had failed the MOCA. So they were, you know, the MOCA is this quick screening tool. They were starting to show signs of cognitive decline, but they benefited. We have run it we have pilot data from one individual that has really severe amnesia, bilateral herpes and viral encephalitis. She was able to use it. She's part of this pilot. And she went from remembering, we compared it to a diary control. She went from remembering almost no episodic details about events to reliably remembering one thing. So it's not like, you know, you can imagine what that's like if you're a person, you're shown a cue, you see it, you have no idea, you know, what it is, or you can remember at least something. So, you know, that step up, it's not like we cured her amnesia. She didn't have rich memories of what happened, but she had, you know, a little sliver of the past. And so I think, you know, that is really encouraging. The neurobiological mechanism. So we designed this to mimic what the hippocampus is doing, to kind of scaffold, to stand in for the hippocampus, and, you know, maybe serve that function of replay so that aspects of these memories can get to parts of the brain that are still intact. So, how she had some lingering hippocampal tissue. Morris and I have talked a lot about this in terms of the context of multiple trace memory theory. How is someone without a hippocampus able to have any episodic memories? We don't know if that's her residual tissue or if, other parts of her brain could kind of stand in because they had been taught these memories by the Hippocamera app.
So
Mario,
in a way
just because the audience is interdisciplinary, could you explain the multiple trace memory theory and also semantic, episodic differences between these different kinds of memory and their relationship with attention and working memory? Just because many people in the audience,
yes, absolutely.
Probably,
okay.
Probably that's the curse and perhaps the privilege of interdisciplinary audiences.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So those semantic details, those are the ones I tried to lay it out in that memory. So the semantic details are these gist level details, like the name of the grandson, what kinds of toys he likes, where the cottage is located, these sort of facts about an event that are shared across many different events. These memories these semantic details are not as vulnerable to aging. They're not as vulnerable to brain damage. And the thought for why this happens, so next I'll describe episodic memories. So episodic memories are memories that pertain to a single episode. So they're tied to a specific moment in time, the sort of what, where, when, who, why, all of the things that make an event unique. Those details are thought to require the hippocampus. So and this multiple trace memory theory is this idea that the hippocampus, anytime you have an episodic memory, you need your hippocampus, but your hippocampus is constantly talking to the rest of cortex, laying down these multiple traces. So if the hippocampus is damaged, you'll lose those episodic memories, but you'll still have semantic details to draw on. And part of the way that crosstalk is happening, how these semantic details are learned by the rest of the brain, is through this process of hippocampal replay. So it's almost like the hippocampus is a teacher. And the way it's like the worst kind of teacher ever, you could imagine, like the hippocampus takes a video and presses it fast forward, and then this is this phenomenon of hippocampal replay. So you can see this if you look at rats, for example, moving on a maze. So you can look at the specific firing patterns when an event is happening. So you see a certain, pattern, an ensemble of cells that fire in a certain way. And then you can observe later at moments of rest or during sleep, those same sequences, the rat is stepping through exactly those same sequences, but at a faster rate. And that's hippocampal replay. And it's thought that is the hippocampus broadcasting these memories to the rest of the brain, to cortex, where those memories can be stored in the long term. So the hippocampus is a really fast learner, but it's much more vulnerable to aging, to time, to interference, to just these memories. Memories are, so-called safer if they get to cortex, where they can be stored in the long term, but memories in cortex lose that episodic flavor. So they just have these high level, gist-like details. So I don't know if that that did it, but happy to answer any questions about it.
That is perfect.
So, yeah, really lovely. So do you think then that given you got no effect on semantic memory, but you did on episodic, do you think that it's due to a differential effect on the cortical bit, or do you think there's still more hippocampal function that even healthy people could do with, and they just don't, so you soup them up? In other words, do you think you'll be giving them a super hippocampus, or do you think you're having an effect? I was going to say downstream, but maybe I should say upstream, because it's the cortex is above.
Right.
So is this I'm just trying to understand, and maybe I'm just being dim, whether you're giving them a super hippocampus when it comes to the episodic part,
mm-hmm.
or whether you're just their hippocampus is healthy except for that one patient, and you're just the cortical bit is getting motivationally enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
I can't quite. Which one is it, do you think?
So I think that those semantic details don't need this replay. They don't need the repeated experiences. They've probably already been learned. Now, this is, you're making me think of a really cool experiment. Like one idea is that the way that we learn semantic facts is from extraction across multiple different episodes. So I would love to use Hippocamera in an educational context, for example. Like, how can we use these principles to help people better learn information? But yeah, so maybe there could be some manipulation there. But I think that why, and I will say as well, for the patient, we also didn't see a benefit of replay for her in terms of remembering those semantic details. So, it might be that it takes more, but I think it's the super hippocampus piece of it. Like the way that these cues are evoking those unique details of the events. And those are the kinds of details that get lost with time. Those are the in favor of the semantic details. But that's just a hunch. I don't know if you have an idea for what you think.
No, I'm just learning. I mean, I find it, and my final question, really, even though I just find this is, it's so interesting what you said about. It started off as a being, trying to give them a super hippocampus primarily in the episodic domain. One can immediately see benefits for people with MCI and Alzheimer's and things like that. But then you said you were surprised yourself that this was almost like a lifestyle intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always thought to myself that everyone deserves at least one sort of transcendent moment a week, right? That you've got to sort of hide from the mundane. And whether it's a concert or a gallery or a dinner, right? And and people don't, right? Months can go by and they go, wow, I haven't really done anything very exciting for a while, right? And I was just wondering whether you could almost use your results as almost like a manifesto for transcendent moments that in fact that people might benefit in a preventive way to protect their hippocampus if they had more transcendent moments, and then that segs into aesthetics as well. That I mean, I feel like you've done the work is extraordinary, but I also think maybe you stumbled upon something even more profound, right? That people are sort of hippocampally starved for episodes, and that you've basically said to people, look, you need to make better aesthetically superior memories if you want to both have a good life, but also maybe prevent hippocampal deterioration and life deterioration. Do you know what I mean, or am I completely mad?
No, you're not completely mad. I'm picking up everything that you're putting down. I totally agree. This was laid bare for me in the pandemic. Just that extreme. Well, and maybe even before that. I do remember. I started using Hippocamera, and suddenly I felt more alive. Like I felt I would think of, so I'd have some Hippocamera cue that took place in some particular place, and then I would look at that cue, or I would go to that place, and all of those other things would come back to me. And memory is how we mark time. So the more memories you have, the more time you have, the more richness you have. And I mean, my thoughts are jumping a bit here as well, but like this transcendence and this link between, I love what you said, everyone is entitled to one transcendent experience a week. I completely agree with that. And memory is the way by which that gift keeps on giving, right? Like think memory is that link between the present and the past. You have this transcendent experience and then you remember it. And it keeps topping you up. And if you don't have those transcendent experiences, there's nothing to remember. And so it's empty. And if you think about how our identity, how you understand who you are as a person, how we do that is we think about the things that we do and the things that are important to us. And if you lose your ability to remember those things, or you don't have those moments, my transcendent experience might be different from your transcendent experience. But what makes something transcendent for us is probably because it ties into core motivational aspects or fundamental values about who we are as a person. And so not only having those experiences, but then remembering them and reminiscing on them is how we stay connected to our identity and our humanity in a way. And so I think that's one reason why isolation and memory disorders are just so devastating to well-being.
That's amazing. I mean, do you think, it's just such an incredible motherload of stuff, but do you think then that given what you're finding and given what you just said, do you think that this, almost like curating your memories, right? Just becoming almost like the gallery owner of your life kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like this is something that people on Instagram and TikTok and Reels, do you think that instead of being criticized for constantly making these images of everything they're doing, that they might actually have tapped into this themselves? Do you think that maybe if we were to do a survey in 10, 15 years time on people who were brought up making reels of their life, that maybe they would actually have less memory loss with aging? I mean, or do you think that there's a qualitative distinction between reels on TikTok and Instagram and the way those are constructed and the mechanics of Hippocamera? I mean, do you see what I mean? Is there some overlap, do you think?
There is overlap. It's something I've thought about a lot. I'll start with just a personal story, which is that in our house, we have this, it's called a mural, and it's a digital photo frame. And so I put in it pictures of our family having wonderful moments together. And what I'm trying to do, and I'm very open about this, is reshape the narrative in our family. I don't have the pictures of my son and daughter clawing each other's eyes out, or, just looking at their screen or being difficult, all of the messy stuff that makes a life. It's the fun stuff we've done together. It's the things that I want to shape, I want to shape our just kind of, these are the things that matter to us, right? This is when you got that soccer goal. This is when you helped your brother learn to skate. These are this is what I want you to go back and remember our family as. So, there is a bit of curation there. And we know that our memories, and we don't want them to be, aren't veridical representations of the past. One way in which I think Hippocamera is different, many ways in which I think Hippocamera is different from TikTok and Instagram Reels. I'm neither on TikTok. Actually, I'm on TikTok just to make sure that my son's not getting into trouble. But aside from that, I'm not on TikTok. But my understanding is a lot of that is for other people, right? It's trying to get the likes. It's trying to, it's performative in a way that I don't know is always authentic. Whereas Hippocamera is about, we really have this emphasis on the little things. So it's, it doesn't have to be, the perfect picture of, kissing the sunset or whatever the things are that people do on Instagram, or, looking perfect. It's, sitting and having the first ice cream cone of the summer, or, simple things like the first time, I'm thinking back to some of my Hippocamera videos, like the first time my daughter really understood fractions, we did a video of that. These are basic things, but they're beautiful. And that's the currency of my life. And they're for me. And so, I think that is a distinction. It's about, getting out of that autopilot, and even in mundane things that wouldn't seem special to really anyone else, trying to find, what it is that makes that different. So
it's very inspiring, really wonderful. Just, sets off so many different thoughts. I mean, you've really hit something. right? And
Thank you.
I think it's fascinating, and I'll stop, otherwise I'll never stop.
Well, maybe
Thank
John,
you.
you may
Thanks.
want to. I just maybe want to mention this about John and some other work that John is doing. John has also like a whole other startup in addition to being a doctor at Hopkins and having a lab at Hopkins, which is like pretty impressive. But he also has this startup for basically rehabilitation of, I think, stroke patients. I don't know if there's other kinds of stroke patients other than stroke patients, but I think it's very interesting. Your version is a little bit towards rehabilitation of people with memory disorders. And John's version is rehabilitation of people with motor disorders. But I'm guessing, John, that sometimes these things go together, or no?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's actually interesting that I was just looking at some data. Morgan, thank you, Ida. We do have these immersive gaming scenarios, and we basically had this idea that if people did something beautiful, social, cognitively challenging, motorically challenging, and cardiovascularly challenging all at once. That's what I meant when I said to you, I agree with the kitchen sink. Yeah.
Yep.
It's quite interesting that I was just looking at some data last night where there were these cognitive benefits, right? Working memory, executive function measures, even though what we were trying to do is get them to play with their affected arm, like Ida was saying. So it really does look like these immersive, motivating, multi-scale, challenging experiences have all sorts of generalization, and it's almost, you want to write as a doctor, have a stimulating, beautiful life, and it's difficult to do that, right? But
Right.
I think that there is, Ida picked up on it immediately. I do think that there's an overlap in terms of the kind of immersive, motivational, inspiring experiences that we need to give people on a more, because not everyone can go on vacation, not everyone can go to beautiful places, so we have to find a way to sort of miniaturize transcendence, right? And I think that's really absolutely fascinating. Yeah. I'm going to read all your papers. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And thank you for this generative ideas to keep in mind. Although I disagree that social media is doing a good job. I think it's doing a curation that's less creative and authentic than the curation of Hippocamera, because in Hippocamera, you're not doing this for others, for either status seeking or other functions of social media. It's for yourself. And it is meant for you to, it's for your equilibrium and the homeostasis of your own memories, as opposed to the other goals or objective functions of curating memories on social media. So while I agree that there is a component of curating an important or transcendent moment, I do think the objective functions are different. And I think that if anything, social media versions of curation lead to a kind of a dissociation from one's actual real memories. Because you look back, that's not what happened in that time, and the stuff that people put on the images. But Hippocamera supposedly is something that's private to you and it's important to you. So a couple of questions for you before we invite Corey and others. I'm so glad Corey's here as well. So Morgan, there is an interaction obviously here between attention, motivation, and memory. I am wondering to what extent do you think this kind of replay prioritization and prioritization of attention also interacts with either learning or interacts with other kinds of memory? So are there, including, for instance, consolidation and sleep? I wonder how this Hippocamera interacts, especially with sleep, and second, with learning. And I will ask them one by one, and also potentially even the content of dreams. So I wonder whether you have any kind of data on either of these.
Yes, you've just described major aspects of our research program. So I'll start first with sleep. Well, so first I'll start by saying, again, just how naive I was at the start of this. I thought, I wrote this grant and I was like, oh, in year one, we'll have titrated the optimal replay schedule, and we'll know when should an event be replayed, for example? How many times should it be replayed? What exactly should the timing of replay be? And then you look at the events that people give you and you realize that the noise that is just inherent in these memories of everyday life, it just so far outstrips the kinds of effect sizes that you're going to get from replaying it, 3 times versus 5 times. So we have a separate set of research in the lab that's using standardized content to try to have higher throughput. So it's a movie. It's Poirot, this BBC detective documentary that nobody's seen, but it has a lot of nice features. You have, right? I feel I'm not surprised that you've seen it. And so we have people watch this show, and then we have them have little replay episodes for elements of the show. And so I'll answer first your question about sleep. We found that replaying, it was actually, there's been some regression to the mean in this effect, but it was actually one of the largest effects of my career that I've ever seen, which was that the timing of, when we didn't go in designing this with respect to sleep, it was just kind of how it played out with where the replays fell. But that replaying the first time, just the first time, we didn't test the other replay times, but memories could either be replayed right before sleep, right after sleep, or kind of like middle of the day. And the benefit of replaying right before sleep was associated, again, there's been regression to the mean, but it was something like a 10-fold increase in the number of details that were recalled. It was so compelling. And so then we tightened up the timings, and we're replicating that. The pandemic just like came at exactly the wrong time in terms of running that study. So we took it onto Zoom, and we should have those results soon. But there is something about replaying right before sleep. So prioritizing that information to be processed, get the sleep enhancing benefits to memory that happen during sleep. And then your other question, I want to take the question about dreams. I have a grad student in my lab, Nelly Matarino, who really wants to do this work. And to understand, well, first, there's pitiful amount of research, I didn't realize this, on the relationship between sleep and autobiographical memory. And there's theories, but not, as much hard evidence as you'd like about the relationship between dreams and autobiographical memory. And I find it really hard to believe that just if you think about what dreams are, it's got to have something to do with, some sort of processing the events of our lives, right? Like and probably this sort of living out one experience, decontextualizing it in a way. So you take an experience that's happened, you kind of experience it you tweak it a bit, right? And so then that memory might become a little bit more flexible, generalizable across other experiences that you've had. That's just a theory. And Nelly's getting some work, trying to get some work to do that. It's really hard to do the dream work. Because for obvious reasons, you need to get people to give dream reports or people to even remember their dreams. But another thing that I'll say, and this is work that Nelly wanted to do when she first came to start grad school, was to see if we could pair Hippocamera with TMR. So TMR is something called targeted memory reactivation, where it's a well-established phenomenon whereby if you replay a memory cue at a specific part of the sleep cycle, memory for the associated content will be better remembered. Now, it hasn't really been done with real life stimuli, things that, everyday life events. So we wanted to see if we could get these Hippocamera cues to be associated with a really tight, 1 second TMR cue that we could replay during sleep to see if that might benefit. The pandemic happened and it was hard, but she's just picking those studies up now. So did that answer your questions? I feel like I'm missing one.
Absolutely. No, I also was wondering about the interaction between using this replay and working memory, executive function, learning, because sometimes there is a trade-off between episodic and working memory. And sometimes there is a trade-off between if we are paying attention to laying down long-term traces versus paying attention to sort of exact or precise tasks, which is why when we have like many days of focusing very much on writing a paper, we don't have a lot of episodic memory from it, because it seems like that kind of even if there are many things that happen, it seems like we're much more focused on the working memory approach in that kind of interaction. And also, I wonder whether there are particular types of learning that can benefit from this, those that can. So I wonder whether you looked at those effects.
Those are really interesting questions. Okay, so for the working memory, cognition, and in a large part, it's a zero-sum game, right? We have a limited workspace, a limited, amount of resources you can devote at any moment in time. I will say that, so I don't have data. I can only speculate on that question that you asked, but it's so short. It's really, we did design this. We wanted this to be something that people could and would use every single day. So it takes just a minute to capture an event, and it takes just a minute to go through a replay session. So I don't, I do say that I think people are paying more attention to life events as they go through the day to say, okay, is this something that I want to record? But I don't think it's so onerous that it's not the same as, like, it's not totally immersive. It's not, distracting. It's not that it's not like the equivalent of writing a paper where, you look up and you realize you're still wearing your pajamas, or, you're not like a functioning human being. But those are interesting. Those are really interesting questions to ask. And in terms of the, learning, like different types of learning, I think I actually didn't have a prediction for the semantic details, getting back to a question that John had asked. I thought that could have gone either way. And it just clearly doesn't. Time and time again, we've replicated that effect. So this kind of studying is not enhancing semantic details. I think there's really interesting. So in this work that we've done with Chris Honey and his postdoc, Tyler Tomita, is looking at these connections between different memories. So what is the bridge so if I have one memory, and then I'm going to think about another memory, I'm likely going to think about a memory that's similar to that, right? Like, as we associate, or, you think about one event in the context of other events, how is it that we're shaping that similarity space in terms of our memories? And so we first started out with this research question, thinking, how should we structure these replay sessions? We can group these together intelligently. We can emphasize certain aspects of the event. We could have same people, same activities, same time, same place, same emotions. And so they've led these series of studies to try to understand, what is the core, or, which features do people overly weigh when they're thinking about the similarity of their real life memories. And overwhelmingly, it's the emotional content. So two events are related as being similar, even if they have different people, different places, different activities, but if they share the same sort of emotional qualities. And this isn't like just valence, it's not positive or negative, it's really complex emotions like heartwarming, frustrating, cherished, and it's that seems to be how we are structuring the similarity space of our memories when we are, asked to think about one memory in the context of others. Yeah.
That is fascinating. I, again, have many questions, but I'll just ask and then invite others on screen to make sure that others get to ask their questions as well. So a brief one is the effect mediated by people's working memory capacities or verbal capacity or other cognitive capacities. And second, do you think this could potentially improve or be used to improve rumination, especially if it's paired with proper prior to sleep kind of thing? And then I have one more question, but I'm going to wait for you to answer these first.
Okay, I love those questions. So the first one, we don't have those data. We should have, like, woulda, coulda, shoulda. There were so many things that we should have collected. We don't. I think, to be honest, the biggest mediator is to the benefit of whether or not it works for everybody, but the magnitude of the benefit is, one, how motivated they are, and two, if their events, like the underlying substrate of the events. If it's just, somebody took a picture of the, snowplow going by for the 15th time, January in Toronto, there's not that many episodic details there to benefit in the first place. So I think, people that have a richer sort of substrate to work on, there's more to benefit from. Rumination, such a good question. I sort of see this as potentially being able to be used as like miniature exposure therapy. So, take an event and okay, let me just back up. People who've experienced trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depressed people, they tend to have overgeneral memories. So memories that are lacking these episodic details. And one idea for why that might be is it's a protective mechanism, right? You don't get close to your memories. So could we use this as exposure therapy in a safe way, to the positive aspects of memory? So I guess it's be kind of like, I'm out of my territory here, but this would be like exposure therapy, sort of cognitive reappraisal therapy. And I found this actually during the pandemic. So again, I use Hippocamera every day. And, I just felt like so lost, so depressed, like nothing is happening. I'm just stuck at home. Like homeschooling is just such a grind. But every day I took a Hippocamera video. I didn't watch them for a long time. And then I started watching them and I was like, wait a minute, we did have fun. There were things, even we found those little tiny moments. We miniaturize. I love that expression, John. We miniaturize the transcendent. So I think it could absolutely be used in that way. And so one study that Melissa is running right now is in a group, we don't have the data yet, but in a group of depressed university undergraduates to see if Hippocamera, first just to characterize their memories and then to see if there might be some benefits for awesome. Memory overall. Yeah.
This is so fascinating. I could ask so many more, but I'm just going to ask one before we move on to Corey with his beautiful wall of, I think it's all national parks in the US posters, and Yosemite is my favorite.
Mine too.
I wanted to say, it seems like potentially LLMs could be beneficial here if there was an elderly and they just have this thing hanging and it goes around, and then the LLM reminds them even of verbal explanations, especially if there is some recordings of their memory recall every now and then, and you can see what are the kinds of things they're missing. And so the LLM can decide, okay, I'm just going to piece together this thing and remind them of those things. Are you guys thinking about that kind of interaction? Is that happening right now? Because it's when you were showing us the text, I was immediately thinking, this could be.
I know. Yes, we are. And so that text, I think, also one aspect of Hippocamera as we assessed it in the lab, people loved doing those autobiographical interviews. They loved to tell us about their events and to have some people ask them questions about those events. And so we've thought, how can we recapitulate that in a scalable way? I mean, one goal is, so we have this tool now that really works. And so I feel like there's an obligation for us to get it out to the world. But that doesn't scale. We've got a great team of undergraduate research assistants, but there's only so many of them, and they can't be doing the AI for everybody. But I think that, and let's just back up, right? What's the point of memories, right? They're to share. Like, what was one of the first things that we said when I got on the call? It's like, when did I see you last, right? We shared a memory of SFN, right? That memories give us these social bridges. And so I think that's an important aspect that Hippocamera does to have this kitchen sink approach. So it's great for oneself to have it, to remind oneself of it, but could we also share them in some way? Could there be that sort of experience of reminiscing and talking about, and I think LLMs could be a way to do that in a scalable fashion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm imagining a lot of elderly just really enjoy the process of reminiscing in general. Yeah. And I do think, especially since the population of the world is growing a lot older, and in the next kind of couple of decades, we're going to have a lot more elderly, it would be very interesting to see these kinds of tools. Corey, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm very excited to see you after such a long time. I think also that's same as a fan, probably.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
great to see you. And Morgan, it's great to see you again. I know we're going to be talking about this in about a month, but I wanted to take this opportunity to sort of ask some bigger questions, a la,
Great.
John and Ida's excellent questions here. So, the first question I had was, what sort of lessons do you think you and Chris and others have learned about where we are with our understanding of how memory works in the real world, and the sort of insights that you kind of went into this with when you were designing the app at the beginning in 2014, and that how those have changed with your experience, in terms of trying to optimize this to work as best as it can. Like, what are the lessons learned along the way, and how are those shaping, what you and your lab are doing now?
It's such a great question. I went in, so I got tenure and in 2014, and it was like, okay, I want to do something different, right? Like I've been working with people that have memory disorders my whole career. And at the end of these sessions, they would say, what do you have for me? Is there anything I can do? And I'd be like, no, but, thanks for contributing to research. Like, your findings will help. And, and then it was like, okay, it's time to build something. It's time to take that basic science knowledge and give it back. And so I really started with that. It was hippocampal replay. It was, the time course of memory consolidation. I wasn't thinking about these things like transcendent moments and the relationship with identity, or even the fact that you don't want to remember everything. Like you just don't. I don't want to remember everything that happened to me today. I don't need to, so, and I was a tenured memories professor, and I hadn't thought about it in that way. So I think there is a really big chasm in terms of I guess I don't want to disparage my colleagues, but I certainly was, thinking in terms of word lists, in terms of, hippocampal replay, firing of neurons, I wasn't thinking about, hey, how does this relate to identity? How does this relate to motivation? And memory, memory as it happens in the real world is part of that big soup of things that are going on all at the same time, right? And so I think as a field, we really have to get a handle on that. Even, the findings with emotions. Like I thought, cognitive maps, it's going to be space. Like space is going to be the thing that links these two together. Like hippocampus is king, and it was emotion, right? It was like, is this you just like these really, complex emotion was the thing that linked the memories overwhelmingly so. And so it just revealed a lot of blind spots that I had for sure.
So just to follow up on that a little bit, in talking with Chris last week at the Learning and Memory meeting, he mentioned, that an earlier version of this was just snapping pictures, as has been done with SenseCam and with a bunch of other things. And it's just kind of, and there's even, commercial devices you can buy, this thing called Memento that can clip onto your lapel, and it'll give you memories. So, but that, he said that in trying to do this, that one of the big issues with that was that our lives are very repetitive, and that when you go to try to, prompt people, even if they've made these beautiful, self related prompts, that was really difficult to actually get at. That there's just, I think, as you said earlier, there's just too much noise to actually pick anything out of that. But so, and then also, the sort of benefits of an intent of, and this is something I asked you at CNS, but the benefits of intentionality here also related to that, right? If something's just taking the pictures for you versus, and you're not intentionally making that memory. A lot of the conversation at Learning and Memory that I came around to was the meaningfulness of the events of our lives. It's not just about capturing those events, but it's about capturing those events that are meaningful to us, almost from a social
Mm-hmm.
psychology perspective. So anyways, I know that's kind of a wide ranging question, but those are the sorts of lessons that I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, we were so sure. Oh, well, so first of all, we also thought, oh, this will be great. We'll know exactly what happened. So we'll be able to score, like they'll tell us about their memories and we'll be able to like, you got 80% correct, right? And you get these pictures and you get, their videos, like you have no bloody clue what happened, right? Like, because what's happening so much of the time is in here, right? Like that's a lot of the context for what makes an event is like how I'm feeling right now, things that are not immediately discernible from the external characteristics. So the study went, as soon as I saw the lead in, so we had this idea, we're going to have Hippocamera continuously take, I can't remember, it was something in the range of like 8, there's going to be some event, it's going to be continuously monitoring. Okay. The user says, okay, this is an event I want to capture. And we had them wearing lanyards, these lovely older adults were so sweet. They wore these lanyards. Real battery life was a real issue. The device got so hot, they had to wear gloves to like not, it was really, we were real serious beta mode. But we got the 8 lead-in images, for example. We thought, okay, this will be great. It'll really like set the scene for what's happening, and it's just the edge of a table again and again, or, it's just like the same, it's them in their kitchen again and again and again. And as soon as we saw that, it was like, pivot, like, nope, we're not. Yeah. So the indiscriminate capture, and we went through hell to get ethics, to get approval for that. It's like, what happens if you catch somebody, a murder, or like someone in the bathroom, or, all of these things. But we ended up not doing that at all. So, lesson learned. But, I should have just done a little pilot before but Chris and I just laughed when we saw, I remember them coming in, and it was just like, this isn't, it's useless.
I would say that, if you're just coming from doing word lists and pictures and things like that, it's not a far stretch to think that we just incidentally encode when we're sitting at the dining table or whatever, right?
Yeah,
and there's a great book that was written in the 90s on memory in the real world, and one of the things that was really captured my attention with that is that they talk about counting memories, right? When we're counting the statistics of memories, how much do we remember, things like that. And then there's the correspondence of our memory to what we actually experienced. And, that kind of reading that kind of helped me have a big shift in how I'm thinking about exactly what we're studying when we're studying memory. And, so I think that, it's really interesting to hear that experience. And I think it's really also informative for those that might want to do these more naturalistic studies in the future.
Totally.
To know, don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I think I've got a couple other questions, but I think I'll just stick with one more. And, I currently get on my iPhone, I've got over like 120,000 pictures since 2015 on my phone, because I'm religious about taking pictures and videos of my kids. And it's partially because I was sort of letting my phone be my Hippocamera, right? Despite not having the app. And I loved it when I got these cool little reminders on my phone. But I think there's some interesting differences between Hippocamera and what is currently offered by apps on phones in terms of reminders, whether it be from Facebook or Instagram or whatever it may be. So I'd love to hear you talk about what your thoughts are on how is Hippocamera optimizing this process. And I guess even, just to talk to those that may be out there in the commercial space that you may be talking to, what potential do you see for this to be in, this sort of idea to be folded into our everyday app experiences.
Yes. Yeah. I would love for someone, if anyone is on the call who wants to, talk about that, please reach out to me. I mean, that's our goal, right? It's so simple, right? And it's just such a slight tweak to what we already do, but it makes a huge, huge difference. So I didn't talk about this, but we do have some smartphone control, like just based on how we typically use our smartphones. Like that is the bar that we have to show that Hippocamera is better than, right? Like people use their smartphones all the time to capture photos and videos of everyday events. How does Hippocamera distinguish itself? First of all of the existing technology, or at least, the Facebooks and the Googles and those reminders that you get, it's not really, so they completely forget about encoding, right? There's this like kind of mindless capture, almost like this hoarding of, collecting. And I do it too with my kids, it's like, oh, let me get this angle, and you're so focused on getting that right picture. You're totally disconnected from the event. And it's about getting the picture rather than the event itself. So this multi-step process that you have to go through with Hippocamera, you can't. It's not about the video. It's not about the video that's created. It is about the process. It's about tagging it, stopping and thinking about it. And then it's also, those reminders that we get. I mean, first of all, not everybody even uses them. Like lots of times, we take all of these photos and videos and don't go back and ever look at them again. I do love the fact though, that there are these automated reminders. I think that's terrific. I think, and I love getting them too. I think it's really, really important that we stop and think about the events of our lives. It's just the way in which Facebook and Apple and Google are doing that are not informed by the way that memories are formed. There's like there's consolidation windows, right? And like once that has passed, it's not like, looking at an event that happened 8 years ago. Sure, I'm going to get like super nostalgic about when my daughter was a cute little baby, but this episodic details from that event are long gone. I needed to lay those down early. So that's, just one example in which I think that those algorithms kind of fall short. But I would love to collaborate with those people that have those kinds of distribution channels, right? To be able to get out, we have, we're us, right? And but they're these tech giants, and just like, it would just be really straightforward to do.
They have that scale, they have that scale. They already have the infrastructure. I'm sure that you're having to deal with, server costs and making sure that you're not blowing up a server with all of these videos. So this was wonderful. I've got some other questions, but we can talk about those in a month.
Great. Thanks so much. Great to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you.
So Morgan, thanks, Corey. Morgan, I must admit, I had the same feeling. You do all this research and suddenly you feel, I'd like to do something, right? and you find yourself suddenly going down this rabbit hole. If anyone said we would be making video games and companies and interventions, I would never have imagined it when I was at Columbia, So totally. I completely agree with that. I also wanted to, in Milan Kundera's novel Immortality, Kundera had this tendency to write a little essay attached to his novel. So in The Unbearable Lightness of Being, it was on kitsch. But in Immortality, he has this extended little riff on what he calls imagology, right? Where people are already, instead of enjoying the moment, they're already thinking about how they're going to tell everyone about it when they get back from their vacation. So in other words, they use all their cognitive time on already imagining the telling, and it detracts from the actual moment itself. And it seems to me that what you've done is sort of exposed, sort of corroborated the imagology point that Kundera makes, which is that if you're just trying to think about the picture and you're just worrying about posting it on Instagram, you're not actually enjoying the moment itself. You're looking, whereas with Hippocamera, it seems like you're making sure that you do encode the actual moment, right? So I think you might, if you haven't read it, I think you quite enjoy.
Thank you.
I've written it down. He called it imagology, right? And
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, and it's very clear with Hippocamera. This is not. I mean, the fact that the videos are speeded means it's not like it's just simply, not this high quality thing that you would want to post. It's a we call it like we tell our participants, this is just like the little tip of the iceberg. You're not trying to get the whole event. You're just trying to get that little string that you're going to pull on, and the rest of the memory is going to come with it. And that this is for you, right? Like, so say the things that are for you that are going to prompt your memory. Why is this important to you? And yeah, I hope I think that makes a difference. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that people wrote in the chat and asked us to ask for them. And a lot of interesting questions. So hopefully I'll do them justice. Some folks are in Europe, some folks are having meetings, but I'll just try to get to them. Okay, so should there be another control group where there are no replays at all? This is asked by Amir. One could hypothesize that the hidden effect was a cost for the replay of other memories.
Okay, wait, let me make sure that I understand that. So there are no replays in the hidden group.
They're suggesting there might be a trade-off because these are the ones, just like, retrieval-induced forgetting.
Oh, I see the point. Yes. Okay, great. Yes, thank you, Amir. We were worried about that. We thought, at the beginning, we were like, what if we design this thing that actually impairs people's memory? That'd be terrible. And so in that Poirot study that I described, where we have this controlled, so in order to get at that, first of all, you need to know everything that happened. In order to assess that empirically, you need to know what happened on either side of the event. You need to know what ground truth is. So unless I'm creeping around and following our participants and, have some sort of abnormal understanding of their days, I can't do this with regular Hippocamera events. So we wanted to do it we had to do it with something that was more controlled. So we looked at this Poirot study where they watched this full episode, and then we replayed only selected scenes from the episode. And this is the study where we titrated the timing of when that replay happened. But another thing that study was looking at was retrieval-induced forgetting. So could it be that replaying the fifth scene, for example, from Poirot would come at a cost for the fourth and the sixth scene? And if so, we need to do some soul searching, because are we causing a problem? Or there could be something, the temporal context model, for example, makes a different prediction, I think, which is that, retrieving events in one context is going to sort of elevate the context of the corresponding events. And what we found absolutely no evidence of retrieval-induced forgetting. So replaying scene 5, certainly memory for scene 5 was enhanced the most, but scene 4 and scene 6 and scene 3 and scene 7 also got a bit of a boost. So there was this sort of Pied Piper effect. You replay one memory and the others come along with it.
Thank you for
Good
that.
question.
I like the Pied Piper.
Yeah, I'm like, is that quite the right metaphor? But yeah,
bring it out, and then the other one.
Exactly. Woo! Yeah.
So Chris Ganjam asks, would be nice to see LLM plus vision models automatically identify salient high-value events and automatically annotate them. Could also generate optimally compressed daily replays. So this is Chris Ganjam, and then he has added some links to Microsoft SenseScam and Microsoft LifeBits. Interesting. But I don't think that's a question. So I'm just going to go to another one that is a question, but unless you wanted to make a comment about that.
No, thank you for that. Are these, I haven't seen them are these in the chat, or I'd love to look at those.
These are all the chats. So if you click on the chat area on the bottom right, this whole thing opens up. Great. So Tyler, in the Ask a Question area, Tyler asks, great hearing about this work, Morgan. Would be very curious to hear your thoughts about, one, other potential applications for applying neuroscientific research to improving human health and well-being. Two, why there aren't more interventions like this in the field.
Those are great questions. So I guess I can start, in terms of potential other applications. we've talked about some depression. We've talked about, there's other, like, the hippocampus is implicated. It's a brain structure that is incredibly vulnerable to neurological insult.
Mhm.
So there are lots and lots of conditions where the hippocampus is implicated, even sleep deprivation, stress, menopause. These are all sorts of populations that could, stand that experience episodic memory decline, and could maybe benefit from this sort of intervention. Why aren't there more interventions like this in the field? It is such a great question. I'll share one story. So when we started this, I was really motivated, to, like John was saying, I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out what the hippocampus does. I will do that probably, but in addition, I wanted to take that knowledge and, literally, like, put my hands on something, like literally, like have something literally to show for it. But then I remember, we did these focus groups early days. We're trying to get one problem, for example, with SenseCam is, like, if you have a memory disorder or you're an older adult who hasn't spent their life around computers, it's very, very hard. Like, the user interface there is going to be impenetrable for someone to use. Would require enormous caregiver support. So it was really important to us from the outset to, we need to co-design this with our intended population. So we had these focus groups with, these lovely older adults who came in, and they gave us this feedback on our early prototypes, and they were harsh, I'm glad they gave us those comments, but I just remember partway through just, like, craving going back into the lab and, doing a study where the dependent variable was, like, reaction time to decide if it was a word or not. I craved that simplicity, and the tractability of the lab-based studies. And I think, it's maybe a failing of our training, but, we're not trained to do these sorts of messy real life interventions. I'm really glad I had tenure. Like, it took 8 years. It took 8 years from the moment that we first kind of talked about this idea to the publication. I couldn't have done that before having tenure. But then at the same time, the feedback that I get with Hippocamera is just, it's really inspiring and motivating. And I hope that I hope that more people will do it, but it's hard and it takes a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it's definitely. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
It's so true, right? Anything worthwhile doing cannot be rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And we've created a sort of time frame and incentive structure that really disincentivizes people from doing the risky, dangerous, messy thing, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to get, there are going to be mistakes and effect sizes that aren't large, and people who are going to be critical. But I think it's, for the young people watching, it's incredibly important. And it's important for everyone to create a structure where you can go for longer and share the risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's just uncanny, a bit spooky hearing you tell the story. I completely get what you're saying. And, would you, I'm sort of curious, given your experience, if somebody came along and had a wacky idea and they weren't tenured, or would you dissuade them? Would you tell them, do something safer? In other words, it's tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky. So Chris Martin, who was the postdoc, the very, very brave, exceptional postdoc who drove, this from the early days, he was a postdoc. He took a huge, huge risk doing this. But we de-risked it because he had 2 research lines. And so, that was how, we thought we could mitigate that risk. It made, I hope Chris, I think he's listening, he might be in the audience, but, it probably made going and giving job talks harder, right? Because they were wildly different research lines. And so, it was hard to integrate them into a single talk. And so we had half as much stuff to talk about. So it took a bit longer. But I also knew when taking him on that I had enough runway for a long postdoc, if that was, what he wanted to do. So, I think I would, if there were, that's a great question that you ask, what would I advise? And I think I would say, somebody who's pre-tenure, I think I would say, like, try to de-risk it in some way, maybe have those sorts of Poirot's type studies that are higher throughput that you can do a little bit faster. But then that means that the main sauce that you're working on takes a lot longer to cook. So yeah. But, I will also say this has been the singularly most rewarding thing that I've ever done in my career. So, so I wouldn't trade it.
No, I think I hope lots of people watch this for many years, right? I mean, it's something I wrestle with too. What do you advise? What do you do? And especially when you're trying to fix and help people. I mean, it's so much messier than, as you say, push the left or the right button. And, and a lot of people do, undergraduate psychophysics because it's so much harder to go out into the real world. I mean, I almost feel it'd be fun to write something about this at some point, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating.
One more question from Leonard Wittkuhn that I think is in Berlin. So let me ask I think we had a bunch of questions from Europe that they might not be currently online. That's why I want to make sure we ask, so when they watch the rewatch, they can have that. Leonard says, very interesting results and great talk. Thank you. I would be curious about your plans to deploy Hippocamera publicly. If I understood correctly, it's only available for research for now. Would it be possible to collect anonymized data at large scale to validate the app in the wild?
So great question. So we also have a little startup, because we're trying to scale this, that's the point. Like, what is, you design an intervention that's made for the real world. It can't just stay in the lab. You have to get it out. And this was another way in which I was really, really naive. I thought, okay, we build something that works. We'll just, put it on our website for free. People can have it. That's not how distribution channels work. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to make something that is ready for a public launch. We are working very hard towards doing that. And we hope to have something ready. I keep pushing it back. We were saying by the end of the summer, we'll see, but certainly by the end of the year. Could we collect at a large scale something that's anonymized? Yes. We obviously, the cues themselves will never be able to anonymize those. They have all sorts of personally identifiable information, starting with human voice, images of people that, aren't even the person who would have signed the, whatever disclosure or consent when they downloaded the app. So any sort of large scale study that we would do would, of course, have no ability to access that kind of personally identifiable information. We do in the current version, and this is really important to the ethics protocol. So the information, kind of ground truth that we have is when an event, so how many times someone replayed, how many events they captured, the significance of those events. We have the timing, and we have GPS coordinates. But of course, like GPS coordinates can be kind of creepy if you know where people are. So we had to best practices, can't remember exactly the parameters, but I think we had to smear it within 1 square mile. So there's some jittering procedure that happens so that any event is jittered within 1 square mile. So, those are the kinds of information that we have in the current version of the app that is anonymous that we have to play with. But I think there's lots of other things that we could add in. So for example, some of these test questions that we're thinking about, or we could ask people, in an anonymized way, but to say, okay, what are the links between these different memories, and get at these, emotional attributes of a memory in ways that aren't personally identifiable. So yeah, those are all sorts of things that we want to deal with in the future. And we're, getting our head, there's so many different ways we could go, trying to get our head around what ones we should do first.
That's fascinating. And we're getting more questions as we're speaking, but I'm just going to ask this. Associative memory can be in many different domains. It can be between events. It can be between events and affective states. It can be between external states and affective states. It can be between external states and events and affective states. How are you guys kind of mapping these different scales and different types of associative memories?
Oh, we're not. I mean, yeah, simply because of that complexity that the individual who asked that question described. But I think the way that we can get around this, if we really wanted to make these nets or networks of memories, is to have people label their own memories. And that's some of that work that we did when we were characterizing the emotional significance of the memories, is we just asked people to tell us, how are these memories related? And there's established scales for that. And so I think we could build up, with a kind of a multidimensional space of memories where we've mapped out, the relationship across them. But we would need the participants themselves to tell us, because that is one thing that I've learned. I could look at your Hippocamera cue and think that I know what's going on, but I have, I'm going to miss most of what the heart of what that memory is about.
Thank you so much. We have kept you here. It's almost 2 hours. It flew by so fast. This has been so fascinating. I feel like our conversation could go for a long time. I do encourage you to take a look at the chat and the questions later if you felt like it. And just very grateful that you took such time to explain to us in detail and share some of the details of your journey that to many of us, I think, is extremely interesting in itself. Just the journey of the kinds of things you thought were going to happen, what you thought you were going to receive in 1 year, and then what changed instead. So it's pretty incredible. John, do you want to add something before we wrap up?
Yeah, I actually, the other thing I wanted to say, Morgan, was so much work seems to be about animal models and then translating. And I think, we've had so many failed drug trials, this obsession with magic bullets, monotherapies, rather than talking about multiplexed kitchen sink experiences that are behavioral and over long term. So I think another real lesson is that by being somebody who was studying human memory, it was obviously an inspiration for what you ended up doing as an intervention. And I hope that people also realize how important it is I feel like the best model for human disease is the human. I know that sounds radical. And I just feel that's another lesson I hope that people get from this is, if you're studying human psychology, human psychophysics, human neuroscience, that in no way means you've given up on having effective interventions. And I hope people realize that my guess is this type of rich intervention is where we should be going. And even if it's not the only type of intervention, if we do come up with any drugs that work, I'm sure they'll be hugely synergized by doing in combination with these type of enriched experiences, rather than saying, go back to your boring life and pop this pill,
Totally.
So there are just so many lessons embedded in this short 2 hours. It's been fantastic. I'm inspired. I feel vindicated. And it's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon, run into you soon in another conference.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, everybody.
You guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.